Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fit Vegan podcast. Today, we have a special episode with a special guest. We have Dr. Michael Greger. I'm really excited to have him on and feeling really blessed. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good, awesome. It's nice to meet you in person and see you walking on your treadmill right now.
Quasi in person, but I'll take it.
Perfect. And so for those of you guys that, in case you don't know who Dr. Michael Greger is, he founded nutritionfacts.org, which is an amazing resource website that I use on a daily basis. He's the author of How Not to Die, How Not to Die Cookbook, How Not to Diet and How to Survive a Pandemic. And we're actually going to do a little giveaway at the end of this podcast. I'm going to be buying a few of your books and giving them away because I really appreciate your work.
Cool.
All right. So for today's podcast, I want to dive obviously into whole food plant-based eating, but specifically in the realm of cancer. And I'll set the context a little bit. I was battling, my fiance had cancer for 4.5 years, and she was vegetarian, went vegan, whole food plant-based. And, it was a big journey. And unfortunately, she passed away this past February. Yikes. And, we had a common passion for helping people experience what it's like to thrive on plants, especially on a whole food plant-based lifestyle. And it's always been our common mission to continue impacting the world with that. And now I'm just taking that on and continuing her legacy and that common mission that we had. So that's why I feel very grateful to have you here and be able to ask you some of those questions.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So one of the first questions is, obviously when she got sick, she went from vegetarian to vegan, and then in the vegan, she discovers like, oh, there's whole food plant-based. So in your experience and in your research, what have you found the difference that it makes for someone to go whole food plant-based in terms of prevention, but also in terms of healing?
Yeah, well, it depends how crappy people's vegan diets were before, but for many people, it can be a big jump. To go from, just eating vegan. I used to speak at college campuses a lot, and, there'd be these vegans, living off of French fries and beer, there's lots of really crappy vegan foods. Coca-Cola is vegan, potato chips are vegan, so you can eat a horrible diet and call yourself vegan. As a physician, I'm more interested in what not what you don't eat, but what you do actually eat. And I'd like to actually see people eat their vegetables. So it can be really quite of a different, because some people just do it for environmental reasons or animal reasons or some of these other, and so they're not really thinking about their health, and that could be to their detriment.
Yeah. And so obviously, like you mentioned, you can be like Oreos are vegan. There's a lot of different things, but what have you found to make the biggest difference when people focus on a whole food plant-based lifestyle that would help more of like the preventative side?
Yeah, well, so if you go to AICR.org, that's the American Institute for Cancer Research, the most prestigious institute when it comes to diet and cancer. They have 10 recommendations in terms of lifestyle. And in terms of diet, in addition to reducing alcohol intake, it's centering one's diet around legumes, your beans, split peas, chickpeas, lentils, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, decreasing meat, decreasing fast food, decreasing junk food. And so that's essentially a whole food plant-based diet. From a health standpoint, it would be healthier to eat a whole food plant-based diet with a small amount of animal products than the strictest vegan diet in the world if you're living off of Oreos.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that. And actually, one of the questions that comes up in the cancer world is soy. That was a big topic when she first got sick and went vegan. And I know you're familiar with Dr. Matthew Nagra. He's a good friend of mine. He's a naturopathic doctor in Vancouver. He interviewed you a few times, and he's awesome. We did a podcast on soy, and a lot of people are scared that eating soy would promote like breast cancer. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, well, you don't need thoughts because they have science, right? I think before 2007, we had were thoughts and, studies on laboratory animals. But then all of a sudden we started having, actual studies where thousands of breast cancer survivors were followed up for years. And you find out who lives longer, those who eat soy, those who don't eat soy. Put all the studies together. Those who eat soy live significantly longer, have significantly lower risk of cancer recurrence, meaning lower risk that the cancer comes back. And so the recommendation has switched from, well, we have no idea what soy will do, depends if we're closer to hamsters or mice, depending on whatever preclinical model that we're using, to we should actively seek out soy foods for women with breast cancer. That's breast cancer estrogen receptor positive or negative, on tamoxifen, off tamoxifen, BRCA genes or not. In fact, probably more effective for those with a genetic predisposition.
Okay. And so it actually kind of brings me to the hormonal aspect. Some cancer are very hormone dependent, and fat intake was another big question for us when she first got sick, and for some other members. So what is your take on fat intake for hormonal health on a whole food plant-based lifestyle? Because a lot of people are going like, hey, you need 40 to 50% of your fats, your calories coming from your fats.
Ridiculous. I mean, look how, I mean, we evolved probably in the context of maybe 10% of our diet being fat for millions of years. I mean, that's what our biology is really kind of attuned to. You can eat a healthy high fat diet as long as you're centering your diets around whole food sources of fat, such as nuts, seed, avocados. But you can produce all the hormones you need. I mean, that's one of the misconceptions about cholesterol, for example, right? The steroid hormones use cholesterol as a precursor. So if you want to make estrogen, for example, you need cholesterol. And so the question is, well, wait a second, make testosterone. You need, so maybe if your cholesterol is too low, maybe you're not going to make enough. Bullocks. Now we have PCSK9 inhibitors, these remarkable injectable biologics that drop people's cholesterol down to like single digits LDL. And they produce all the hormones fine. So not something to worry about.
Okay, perfect. It's yeah, because so basically I help people thrive on a whole food plant-based lifestyle, and that's one of the common questions that people had. It was like, hey, this seems pretty low in fat. Like, am I going to be okay from a hormonal perspective? So
high fat, low fat, as long as you're whole plant foods. That's it. As long as the source is whole plant foods, you can eat lots of high sugar diet, eating lots of fruit, high fat diet, eating lots of nuts. As long as the sources are whole foods.
Okay, so it's kind of a safe bet as long as you're keeping whole foods.
I'm not worried about the content. I'm worried about the source.
Okay, awesome. And actually talking about fat brings me to the other question. A lot of people are very carb phobic when it comes to transitioning to a whole food plant-based lifestyle, right? They think it's going to make them put on fat and they're just going to experience all this bloating and that they're genetically different. And for them, just all the weight is going to start piling back on. So I'd love to hear not your thoughts, but the science behind it.
I've got a whole book on that subject, how not to diet. So
yeah,
I encourage people to check out. I do have a chapter on lowering one's glycemic load, which would indeed cut out crappy refined carbs. But whole intact grains are one of the healthiest foods we can possibly eat. Inadequate whole grain consumption blamed on millions, literally more than 3 million deaths every year.
And that's insane. And in terms of fruit consumption, do you ever notice any difference for people that consume higher fruits? Because people like, hey, you can only eat so much sugar from fruits.
Eat all the fruit you want. In fact, they even profile. In fact, I have a video called like how much fruit is too much. My profile study where I think it was like 23 servings of fruit a day, and it just had good side effects.
Okay, that's amazing. All right, so people don't need to worry about soy. They don't need to worry about fruits. They don't need to worry about carbs.
Well, they have to worry about not eating enough fruit. That's a legit concern.
Yeah, it's a good concern. So, and this is a little bit out of the realm, a little bit of whole food plant-based. Well, it is a plant. I'm curious as to like your thoughts on CBD with cancer and inflammation.
No data.
Okay, no data. Okay,
no data. So maybe it's great, maybe it's terrible. We have no idea.
Okay,
but anyone who says otherwise is just making shit up.
Okay, good, because it is pretty expensive, and we're buying a lot of it just based off like what you hear around.
Yeah, it's surprising, but anecdotes will pop up for people trying to sell you something.
Yeah, crazy how marketing works. Right? So basically and that's kind of why I do what I do, and I want to have this conversation with you, is the best tool that people can use to help prevent and just put all the chances on their side would be to focus on eating a whole food plant-based lifestyle. There's not really anything else that people could be putting an emphasis on.
They can stop smoking. They can exercise. They can wear their seatbelts and bike helmets and get vaccinated against COVID. There's lots of things you can do, but most important is diet.
Okay, perfect. So that'd be the number one thing one of the things that people should look at. I'm in the fitness space. This is what I do. And I see there's a big divide between the whole food plant-based movement and the fitness world, right? I come from the background of being a bodybuilder. I've been vegan for 8 years, but I used to be the chicken, rice, broccoli, 6 meals a day type of guy. And it was very limited in nutrients and in variety. And there seems to be this belief
Broccoli's
that
good.
when it's the only vegetable you eat for 3 years,
Well, if you're gonna pick one vegetable, not a bad choice.
Yeah. So there seems to be this big divide in terms of simplicity of nutrition, right? People like, if I eat the same thing every day, 5 times a day for the next year, then I will achieve the body, the fitness goal, and the health that I want. But I'm kind of more on the other side of like, hey, we focus on a whole food plant-based lifestyle. We include some variety. You can still get the results that you want. And I remember in your book, How Not to Diet, you talked a little bit about that, how like plant diversity made a big difference, and then the benefits of adding strength training to one's regimen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dietary diversity is important. So you have people eat, same number of servings of fruits and vegetables, but just switch it up. May actually have better anti-inflammatory effects, for example. There's actually a biological phenomenon called sensory specific satiety. It's the reason why, the 10th bite of chocolate doesn't taste as good as the first bite of chocolate, is because your body have this inborn striving for diversity, for dietary diversity, because your body doesn't know anything about nutrition, doesn't know anything, but all it can do is try to get you to eat a whole bunch of things. And so, for example, you put toddlers in front of 10 foods, they will eat a variety of foods over their favorite food. They may have one favorite food, but they'll still eat a variety. That's because we are hardwired for variety. And it's not just kind of a preference thing, like you squirt lemon juice in someone's mouth and you get a big burst of saliva. You squirt it again, you get a slower burst, and you do 10 times in a row, and finally you put lemon juice in your mouth, nothing happens. Then you switch to lime juice, huge burst in saliva, right? I mean, just that little teeny tweak, same acid, everything, gets your body all excited because we were just wired that way, so we get all the nutrients. It's important. There are certain foods, if you're going to restrict your diet, there's certain foods that are healthier than others. But why restrict your diet? You'd only want to restrict, unhealthy foods, variety of unhealthy foods. But, the more varieties of vegetables you eat, presumably the more vegetables you eat, and that's what we like to see.
Perfect. So our body is naturally seeking diversity.
No, they did those. There's the crazy studies with like pasta shapes and how not to diet, right? You like give kids, mac and cheese, and you switch it to like penne and cheese or something, the exact same thing. All of a sudden they eat more. It's just like your body is just wired. So we can use that to our benefit by monotonizing meatballs, basically, right? Having the same kind of junk, or ideally no junk, but diversifying the healthy foods, because then our body wants to eat more.
Oh, so we're just wired for diversity from the start.
We're
just wired for diversity.
Wired. So take advantage of it.
Perfect. And it kind of
brings
the
food industry does. That's why the food industry gives you, salty pretzels, because you order more beer, because you're just back and forth. That's why people eat salty and sweet stuff, right? I mean, you actually eat more food that way, which the food industry loves, but not necessarily the best for us.
Yeah, that's a direction I like to head into. Tips. Obviously, you shared a lot in How Not to Diet, but what have you found to be like the number one most useful thing for people that are struggling with the salty, sweet craving?
Oh, well, you fulfill that salty sweet craving with healthy foods. So you have a sweet tooth, eat a sweet potato, right? Have a salty tooth,
cinnamon.
Make some miso soup or something. There's healthy ways to get all the tastes. You don't need to, eat crap.
Yes. And so that's actually, again, from the fitness space, there's this concept. I've heard of if it fits your macros.
I've heard about macros.
right? But there's this concept that if you can make something fit, like for example, like an Oreo within your calories for the day or within your daily intake, that you would still lose weight. I'm curious, do you ever eat foods that are not whole food plant-based from time to time, or is it
Oh my
strictly?
God, when I'm on the road, there's just no way I can eat healthy. I can bring this. I mean, I run out of snacks after like the third leg of a trip or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm lucky and there's like a Whole Foods. I can go to their, salad bar or something. But a lot of times, like you go to, no, I don't care how healthy your restaurant is. They're going to be pouring fat, sugar, salt onto everything, right? So you try your best. When I'm home, I have control over my environment. I eat pretty healthy, but when I'm out and about, it's difficult.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I was very curious as to if you were like always eating 100% whole food plant-based. It's hard, obviously, if you're on the road and living out of
Oh, right.
hotels
But
and all
I mean,
this.
you look at my fridge, it's all good, except for hot sauce. It's all good.
Yeah, Frank's hot sauce.
I do have Frank's. I've got, that's one of about a dozen,
Okay.
but too much sodium. Tabasco is better in terms of sodium.
Okay, good to know. And actually, we spoke a little bit, Mitch, about plant diversity, which brings me to kind of Dr. B's book, right? Fiber Fueled, focusing on plant
Oh,
diversity
yeah,
and
cool.
digestion.
Yeah.
Really good book as well. And what I've noticed is a majority of people seem to be having an issue with digestion when they transition to a whole food plant-based lifestyle. What have you found to be certain tips or tricks or things to help alleviate that discomfort during the transition?
Yeah, I mean, most people actually do it just fine, but some people need to move slow. I mean, if you've been slathering your gastrointestinal lining with cheeseburgers and milkshakes your whole life, I mean, you just don't have the microbial machinery in your gut to handle fiber. But you have this dysbiosis. You have these bad bugs in your gut. You got to switch those over, and it may take a while. But you feed them prebiotics, you resistant starch and fiber, and particularly in the whole grains and legumes. And they slowly start, all the good bacteria slowly start coming back and taking over, and then you get the best of both worlds. But that can be a tough transition for some people, and some people have to go slow. Some people are sensitive, but it doesn't take long, usually 2 weeks, and that's what the studies show you. Like, start feeding people chickpeas. I forget. I have a video on the study. I think it's like half a cup of chickpeas a day, and most people totally fine. I mean, they've never eaten chickpea in their life all of a sudden, but I forget, a small percentage actually do suffer kind of bloating and GI discomfort, but it goes away 2 weeks. So you just have them keep eating those, and it just goes away. And then, because it just takes a while for your gut bugs to become accustomed.
Was it just persistence and keep sticking with it? There's not really
Yeah, and starting slow if you have a problem. I mean, it could be as little as like a spoonful of beans a day. Let's start there, right? And then, slowly ramping up as your good gut bugs take over.
Okay. And this might sound like a silly question, but would hydration, like making sure you stay hydrated, make a difference in some of that gut discomfort and bloating?
Hydration is always good.
Right. And so actually, that came up as a question in our group. So you mentioned like drinking and how not to diet, and drinking some water before your meal helps to keep you full, right? Before you eat.
Wild.
And so I used to do that way back in the day when I was bodybuilding, because I was starving before a show, and that was a really great trick. But then I encountered that one of the arguments was that it would dilute your stomach acid for the meal that you're eating.
Yeah. I mean, do you think your stomach is that stupid? I mean, this is ridiculous. So actually, if you drink a whole bunch of water, your stomach just absorbs the water until it's the exact right acidity, exact right viscosity. And if you don't drink water, guess what? Water pours through the stomach wall from your bloodstream into your stomach to achieve the same amount of acidity, the same. So drinking water or not, you have the exact same everything in your stomach. Your body is way too smart to be screwed around like that.
Okay. So again, drinking it after, before wouldn't make any difference.
It does make a difference. You drink before.
Okay, and not after.
Drink all the time. You just don't want to exceed 3 cups per hour. That's usually a typical kidney max.
Okay.
And you shouldn't increase your water consumption at all if you have something like kidney failure or heart failure without talking to your doctor.
Good recommendation. And one of the question, you obviously protein has been a big topic in the whole food plant-based community, people looking to transition, because I know a lot of people are going to be listening are looking to transition to a whole food plant-based lifestyle.
Right.
Protein argument, I'm sure you talk about it every single podcast, but I'm very curious as to your take in terms of shift in body composition and gaining lean muscle, because I know you covered that in How Not to Diet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any argument there, but anyone who doesn't know how to get enough protein on a plant-based diet doesn't know beans, right? Legumes, beans, chickpeas, lentils, these are the plant protein superstars. Encourage people to eat 3 servings a day. So hummus or lentil soup or bean dip, or there's all sorts of ways you can do it. I today had chickpeas. What did I have for breakfast? I don't remember what I had for breakfast, but definitely had some chickpeas for lunch. And gonna have some kind of bean. What am I gonna have? Black beans for supper. So yeah, legumes every day. You need 0.8 grams per healthy kilogram body weight, easy. So it's only like 50 grams, about 45 for women, 55 for men, kind of the average height.
Yeah, and you mentioned in the book as well that up to a certain point, it doesn't make any difference, and that what's going to make a difference is resistance training.
Oh, that's all that's going to make a difference. You can eat all the protein you want. If you lie in bed all day, your muscles will melt away. You put yourself in a body cast, I don't care how much protein you shove down your nose. You literally, your body's like, well, why am I making muscle if you're not going to use it? It's not stupid. It's just going to make muscle for nothing. Same thing with bone, right? If you're not exercising, if you're not, doing any kind of putting any impact, weight-bearing exercise in your bones, your body's like, why am I making a skeleton all day long? I mean, it takes a lot of energy. Screw it. If you're not going to use the skeleton, forget it. That's why astronauts lose like 2% of their bone mass every month, because they're floating around. Their body's like, well, screw this. This is useless. So same thing. We're like astronauts on the ground. We're just, floating around on our couches, and our body's like, no reason to make anything musculoskeletal, right?
Well, I'm happy for people to hear it from you. Gives it a bit more credibility that people do need to strength train.
Yeah, I mean, you don't listen to me, listen to the science. And the science says resistance exercise is critically important for our health.
Good. Awesome. And one question I want to ask you is, I'm sure you've done a lot of these podcasts and a lot of interviews, a lot of talks, and you've been, around this world for a really long time. What is one of the main misconceptions that you hear of most often and that you'd like to set clear for most people?
Protein's one. People ask a lot about organic foods.
Does that make a difference?
I talk about it in How Not to Die. I talk about a modeling study that suggested if half of Americans add a single serving of fruits or vegetables to their daily diet every year, we would prevent 20,000 cases of cancer. That's how powerful produce is. Yeah. But because they're talking about conventional produce, pesticide-laden produce, the additional pesticide burden on the American public would cause 10 cases of cancer. So overall, we would just prevent 19,990 cases of cancer, right? That gives you a sense of the tremendous benefit of eating fruits and vegetables versus the tiny bump in risk. You say, wait a second, why accept any risk at all? Get all benefit, no risk by choosing organic. Great, but we should never let concern about pesticides prevent us from stuffing our face with as many fruits and vegetables as possible.
Beautiful. And B12 tends to be another common topic. Is there a plant-based source of B12?
There's no animal or plant-based source. It all comes from microbes. And so, yeah, you can get some drinking out of a mountain stream or well water or something, but now we chlorinate the water supply to kill off any bacteria. So don't get a lot of B12 in our water. Don't get a lot of cholera either. That's a good thing that we live in a nice sanitary world. Our fellow great apes get all the B12 they need, eating bugs, dirt, and feces. I prefer supplements. 2,000 micrograms once a week of cyanocobalamin. All the B12 you need, costs less than $5 a year. Or you can eat B12 fortified foods every day, but critically important for anyone eating a plant-based diet.
And would that be one of the only supplement kind of recommendations for people that are looking to transition?
Well, it depends on sun exposure. Some people living in northern climates during the winter months might want to take some vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin. But those are the only 2 vitamins that are not made by plants. So everything else you should be able to get in your produce.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, I know we're almost at the end of our time here, so I want to say thank you very much. I really appreciate you jumping on the podcast and providing so much value in sharing the science, not your thoughts. And I just want to say for everyone listening, once you're listening to this podcast, it's going to be a post up on Instagram. I'll be giving away 10, actually I'll give away 10 of your books. So I'm going to buy 10 of your books, and then I'll post all the instruction in the comment.
Wow.
And then you guys can just go and participate. I genuinely really appreciate your work. Me and Jen were a big fan. We read your books, the whole process she was going through cancer. So it really means a lot that I get to connect with you today, and that you jumped on.
Fantastic. Keep up the good work yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you for jumping on the podcast.